Welcome. I'm Kevin Miller. I have conversations with people that help us make better meaning of our lives. In this episode, your state of mind is likely hurting your gut and digestion more than what you are or are not eating. At first, I want to say we're not saying that what you eat doesn't matter. Of course it does. But after a decade of my own involvement in functional medicine and with myself, with my kids, family, I see the biggest culprit, or at least one of the primary culprits for gut and digestive issues to be our minds, as much or more than anything else. I continue to meet people who are doing, this is the common thing, all the right things. And they really are. Again, I've dealt with it myself, and I've walked with some of my kids, my adult kids, doing all the right things, eating clean and taking great supplements and exercising and getting good sleep and trying to be restful, meditate. And they're still dealing with gut and digestive discomfort. And I get it. I don't have a magic solution here, like, again, meditating or something to just calm your mind. I'm concerned it's just the normal lifestyle that I have led for the majority of my life till as of late, of busyness and fast pace and production and achievement and meeting everybody's needs and the constant stimulation. And it's just overpowering everything else. So a few years ago, and that's why I'm bringing this discussion back, I sat down with Dr. Will Cole. I became of Dr. Cole through Gwyneth Paltrow, the actress, actually, as he is her functional medicine doctor and one of the providers in her Goop wellness and lifestyle brand and company. And I've had a few of her personalities on here. Well, Will has admittedly become a health and wellness resource for a lot of influential people. If you visit his Instagram page, he's got over 800,000 followers, and you'll see big name folks, celebrities and whatnot. So he has a book called Gut Feelings: Healing the Shame-Fueled Relationship Between What You Eat and How You Feel. And I like that focus on shame, because I think people do. They feel, call it shame, call it guilt, call it just frustration or anger for, again, doing all this good stuff and still having problems. And so we get into the philosophy of our wellness, and not just clinical and prescriptive aspects, which to me is really the foundation. It's our philosophy. So your health and wellness will ultimately be a result of your philosophy on health and wellness. We'll actually coin the term shameflammation. I'm interested in that, which I encourage you to listen into as we talk about that later on here. I find that shame is a reality with a lot of people, a lot of men especially, and one they are ignorant of and prone to avoiding even talking about. And yet it's these things that weigh on our minds that we're seeing cause problems. And we have these physiological results in our gut. So you're going to hear, I believe, some paradigm shifting information here on health and wellness overall. So coming up next, my conversation with Dr. Will Cole about how to heal our gut.
Will, as we were talking a second ago, I was going to have you on the show with your last book, and apparently my people didn't follow up with your people, but I wanted to have you on here. I so am a fan of an advocate of your functional medicine, of what you stand for, of what you do. I'm interested in, at the beginning of this book, you literally say, this book is different than anything I've ever written. Tell me more.
Thank you so much. I'm glad we're talking too. This is going to be fun.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a lot of what I've written before. It's my fourth book. I've written more straightforward, clinical nutrition based, functional medicine based, prescriptive, if you will, as far as, okay, this is a protocol. This is how you can use food and wellness in very specific, granular ways. Gut feelings is really more philosophical. It is more nonlinear. It's more of the heart, why we do the things, whatever we're talking about within wellness. So it's the art of wellness. I would say the first three are more of the science of wellness. This one's more of the art of wellness with some science, but definitely more art forward. And it's the heart and the mindset behind why we do the things we do. It's born out of my clinical work with our telehealth patients, as all the books have been. But this is just born out of countless and countless conversations that I've had of really healing our relationship with ourselves, healing our relationship with food, and really dealing with this bi-directional relationship between mental health and physical health. And in the West, we'll oftentimes, as I say in the book, separate mental health from physical health. But mental health is physical health. Our brain is a part of our body. So we're talking about both gut and feelings in the book, physiological and psychological, physical and mental, emotional, spiritual facets, how things like chronic stress, shame, unresolved trauma, how do these things how are they stored in the body physically, how they raise inflammation levels, dysregulate our nervous system. So it's a lot to unpack. I mean, you're talking about things like stress and trauma and shame. It is anything but prescriptive in the sense of there's a lot of complexities. That's a lot to unpack, but I wanted to go there.
Well, and when you say philosophical, my thought is, man, if you're talking about feelings, how can it not be philosophical? And I really wanted to go there with you first, Will. And, we talk about the mental health crisis that we're in, but you're in the functional medicine world, which I'm so privileged to be amongst a lot of practitioners as well. And we see the stats, and we see the stats on every chronic illness and disease has been on the rise and kind of on a hockey stick. But I think we as a culture, we really don't believe it, man. We just go out and we think, it's just the norm. People are kind of overweight, and kind of everybody has some kind of chronic illness, and we've kind of accepted it as the norm. But then you in your work know that, no, this is really tragic right now. I talk about a pandemic. We've got one on health that's just continually on the rise. So when we come to mental health, when we come to the topic of feelings, I kind of want you to hit there and say, no, we really are at a mental health crisis. And what do you think has changed? Because I've heard somebody say, oh, it's just we're more aware of it now. I think that it really is worse. Mm-hmm. Why? If you look at it and just go, look, I wrote a book on feelings because we are wrecked mentally, and give me your highlights as to why you think that this is on such a bad trajectory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. You can't look at the statistics and say it's normal. And I get that every time I do talk about the statistics on social media, I'll hear some people say within the comments, well, it's better diagnostics, we're aware of it more.
Right.
That's part of it. I don't think anybody's going to say that's not a part of it, but nobody that knows the statistics, that's seeing what we face as a society, says that this is solely due to better diagnostics. No, it's growing and it's more rampant than ever. And it's just because something's common and ubiquitous doesn't necessarily make it normal. And us to normalize this is hurting a lot of people. It's not okay. And these things are largely overcomable, healable, improvable, supportable things. So why would we want to settle for anything less when you're dealing with things like anxiety and depression and different neuroinflammatory problems is really what you're talking about. A lot of these brain health issues are inflammatory in nature. So why are we seeing such staggering rises of this? Why do we have such stark statistics like the average young person today has the same level of anxiety as a psychiatric patient in the 1950s?
Yeah.
That's where we're at right now. And that's not my statistic. That's in the scientific journals. That's in the medical journals that are looking at the levels of things like depression, anxiety. And you look at the suicide rate of teenagers and young adults. This is not because we hear about it more. It's happening more and more. And we really can't have the conversation about these issues without having a conversation of chronic inflammation. It's a dysregulation of our immune system. And that's a lot to unpack. We're a part of nature. I mean, there's dysregulation going on a planetary level, and we are intimately connected to the planet. And it really is what researchers refer to as an epigenetic genetic mismatch, or an evolutionary mismatch. Our majority of our genetics haven't changed in 10,000 plus years, but yet our world has changed so much in such a finite, small period of time when you're putting that into context with the totality of human history. So it's multifactorial. It's not just one thing, but we have to look at the foods we're eating or the foods we're not eating, the soil microbiome, the soil of which our food is grown in, and the intimate connection with our gut microbiome. And we have to look at our exposure to environmental toxins. We have to look at our relationship with technology. We have to talk about community and our lack thereof. It's going to be a confluence of factors that are triggering these genetic predispositions that have been lying dormant for 10,000 years, but are being awoken and triggered like never before in human history because of this evolutionary mismatch, is how they word it. So yeah, that's what we're facing with. And it's not just mental health issues. It's chronic inflammatory problems across the board. the cytokine model of cognitive function. Cytokines are pro-inflammatory cells. So when you're talking about things like anxiety, depression, brain fog, fatigue, ADHD, autism, autoimmune problems like MS, those things are growing, and inflammation's the commonality between all those problems. But it's not just brain health issues. It's other autoimmune problems, it's metabolic issues, it's cancer, it's heart disease. All of these have inflammation at its heart. And we have to ask the question, why are we seeing these chronic inflammatory things rising? Well, it's those reasons I just mentioned.
Well, and I want to dig in there. I do want to get a little bit further just on feelings and how you kind of where you bring us initially in the book. I mean, I'm more enamored with myself, and as I study this stuff and have folks like your, Terry Reel and folks on the show and look at, I mean, we trust our feelings. Something happens in our lives. We trust our initial feeling. We think that that's reality. We form a perception about that. That becomes our belief. And here we go running around with all these different beliefs on the same thing and not understanding our feelings, thinking that they are real in essence. And what I feel you bringing us to in essence, and kind of go to that gut, my gut told me this, so I trust my gut. Our gut feelings is that we just can't trust those anymore because we're so, just as you talked about, we are so compromised. And it's hard for me, Will. I mean, I want to look at, I'm an athlete. I want to look at, okay, I'm eating clean. I'm doing my exercise. I'm getting my sleep. I'm good. And you pull those three out and say, yeah, we want to look at that. Wouldn't it be great if it was that simple? I don't want to go over here and consider meditation or consider my feelings or my emotions. I don't want to, as you talk about, slow down. I don't initially want to, I guess. I'm up here on these shallower appetites, and you're calling us, say, man, if you want the full deal, you're going to have to go deeper. Am I tracking on the overall premise?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, look, if somebody has a set of tools in their life that's working for them and they feel great, the labs look great, the quality of life looks great, their relationships look great, then keep doing what you're doing. Not everybody has to go deeper. But when you look at the statistics that I talked about earlier of brain health issues, autoimmune problems, metabolic issues, a lot of people have to go deeper because these are not simple, quick fix issues. There's multiple layers to that. We have to. We're compelled to if we want to feel better. And as I mentioned earlier, these things are largely improvable by looking at these facets of the gut and the feelings, the physiological and the mental, emotional, spiritual. And but we have to know what we're dealing with to do something about it. And many people don't want to go there. They don't want to look there. And our culture is really bent towards that, right? It's numbing and distracting mainly. It is the superficial is a lot sexier than the sublime in our culture. And I think that that's part of the problem, is that people are just on autopilot and they do the same thing every day. They're busy, they're distracted, they're numbing themselves with the next dopamine hit. And they don't really want to look at, why do I have this background anxiety? Why do I feel wired and tired, anxious and exhausted? Why do I have these digestive problems? What's my body telling me? And instead of going there and digging deep and asking, why are these check engine lights on in my life, whether it be anxiety or depression or fatigue or digestive problem, whatever we're talking about, people want to ignore it and put it on the back burner until they're forced to face it, right? It's like going to be through pain or proactive transformation. And many people, they put it off and put it off and put it off until their body literally does not give them the option to do anything else. So it's just a matter of when we're going to listen.
Give me, and there's plenty of people listening who probably have heard the aspect of the gut-brain connection. And I know in your world, that's pretty, you're well-versed. It's elementary. But it's just still not out in the culture. As I talk to people, we hear about it, but if you ask somebody to give one word to it, they couldn't. And you mentioned, I think in the book, I'm going to paraphrase probably badly, but that idea, it really just spoke to me again of when something happens, when you have a little scare or something, you have that adrenaline rush, how you feel it in your gut. I mean, you don't feel it down in your toes. You don't feel it on your left butt cheek. You feel it in your gut. And that should be kind of a, wow, okay, wait a minute. So when you say gut brain, this is a literal thing. It's not just some conceptual, philosophical type thing. So give us the layman's term on that connection.
Sure. So you're right. It's somehow our ancestors knew. It's within our vernacular. It's how the language that we use even today. We maybe don't oftentimes stop to think why we say these things, right? When we say, I just have a gut instinct, or I feel it in my gut, or a gut feeling, or I butterflies in my stomach, or it's what's going on there. That somehow our ancestors knew what researchers are now confirming, the mechanisms of actions of these things. The gut and brain are formed from the same fetal tissue. So when babies are growing in the mother's womb, the gut and brain are formed from the same fetal tissue, and they're inextricably linked for the rest of our life through what's known as
that right there. That's no people. We don't know. I did not know that. I mean, I knew about the connection. I did not know that. I mean, that should be like a telltale sign for us all. Holy smokes, it's literally out of the same tissue. That's dramatic, I think.
It is. And if you think of, I mean, there's far-reaching implications. It's multifaceted. But if you think about it, even just on a elementary level, the gut, even when you think of what the intestines look like, they even resemble physically the brain. And 95% of serotonin, our happy neurotransmitter, is made in the gut. 50% of dopamine is made in the gut. These things don't pass through the blood-brain barrier, but what they do, they work on the second brain, is what the researchers call the intestines, the gut. They work on GI motility. They work upon something called the vagus nerve, which is the largest cranial nerve in the body, which is connecting the gut and the brain. And there's what's called the gut-brain axis, which really has to do with the vagus nerve and the enteric nervous system. So the way that our gut and brain, this crosstalk, this bidirectional communication between the gut and the brain and the brain and the gut, it's vast. I mean, it's through the vagus nerve, certainly, but it's also through the microbiome itself. So the microbiome is separate than us, but it's, depending on the study that you look at, it's upwards of 100 trillion bacteria in the gut. To put that into perspective, we have around 30 trillion human cells, around there, 10 to 30 trillion human cells. We're exponentially more bacteria than human. Bacterial cells outnumber human cells exponentially. We're sort of a sophisticated host for the microbiome, and that's influencing our neurotransmitters. It's influencing inflammation. It's where 75% of the immune system originates. So inflammation is a product of the immune system. And of all these things that we're facing as a society is chronic inflammatory in nature, we have to look at where the predominance of the immune system resides, which is in the gastrointestinal system, and it involves the microbiome. So we co-evolved with this microbiome, and microbiome research is at the heart of what a lot of researchers work in understanding, in part at least, why we are seeing these autoimmune problems, metabolic issues, and brain health problems. Certain levels of bacteria are associated with things like anxiety and depression, other neurological problems. So it's just, I mean, go on and on and on. It has to do with the vagus nerve, has to do with the microbiome, has to do with the crosstalk between the gut and the brain.
Okay. So again, it feels layman's terms, but if I look at my gut, what I put in my mouth or what I don't put in my mouth, whatever, either way I can go wrong. But what do I put in there? So if I'm putting in there, beer and chips and processed foods and sugar and all the things that we'll talk about in a second, put those in there, I am compromising my brain. These are not just, feel like the American perspective, we still tend to look at food as fuel. We just think of it as this wood burning stove, just throw something in there, and if it'll burn, you're good, which you can get away with, man. You know that. You can get away with that as a young athlete, especially, man. Just eat anything, get the calories in, you can go perform until you can't. And we see that happen a lot too. But even if we look at the good foods, and this has been frustrating for me, looking at the good brain food, looking at the good fats, and if I eat a healthy avocado, yet my stomach can't do anything with it, it's not helping my brain. So again, I'm looking at that dietarily, and yet over here, you're also saying in this gut feelings, if I'm over here, and even if my gut could theoretically be okay, but I'm over here with high anxiety, fear, all the negative thoughts, that's just as bad as pouring Cheetos or motor oil or whatever in there too. And it kind of gets you thinking chicken or the egg, can it? I kind of got a little bit not confused, but and maybe that's where you can't say necessarily. Where would you go on that though? Feelings versus what we're actually putting in.
It's such an individual conversation. I see people that have a lot of things going on with the gut side of gut feelings and their underlying gut problems, nutrient deficiencies, inflammation, chronic infections, environmental toxins. Those things are impacting their mood, certainly for many people. And for some people, it's predominantly the chronic stress they're dealing with, the lack of good quality sleep because of the stress, the unresolved trauma. They have high ACE scores, which are adverse childhood experiences or events. Those things are impacting their brain health and inflammation levels. So that's why it's both. For most of us, it's going to be a bit of both. It's going to be a confluence of factors, both gut and feelings. And that's why both need to be addressed. And I think that's what I want people to explore. What are the researchers in the scientific journals looking at as being effective tools within your toolbox to deal with the clinical nutrition side and nourishing your body with nutrient density and bioavailable nutrient density, specifically to give your body and brain the raw materials it needs to have optimal neurotransmitter health and gut-brain axis communication and nervous system support health. But as I say in the book, it's not just about what you're feeding your body. Like, what are you serving your head and your heart? And that's the more nebulous stuff. That's like how do I tell somebody, don't pick up that big slice of stress every day, or the big, cake of shame every day. That's grazing your inflammation levels just as much as that food that doesn't love you back.
I want to hit something. I don't want to forget. You mentioned sleep, you mentioned tools. And as we look at this, I'm not a techie guy. I'm not a detail guy. And yet I am enamored with the wearable devices now, where I can look kind of like advanced diagnostics. You get the regular blood panel from the doctor and they say, hey, you're not dying, everything's good, but you feel like crap. Go get the advanced diagnostics like you do in the functional medicine world. And you see, no, what's really going on under the hood. So on a day-to-day aspect though, having, a wearable device, and I'll ask you if there's one that, one or ones that you like, but having those that show, no, you got 8 hours of sleep, but it was complete crap. You got zero deep sleep. You got crappy REM sleep. Had a lot of stress during that. Or your sleep was great, but your stress throughout the day was high. I actually don't like it. A lot of times I don't want to know the truth, but it's the only way I can figure out, oh my gosh, when I'm in this environment, my stress level is higher. I didn't even know. And now to dig in and unpack that. And for candor, I'm just wearing a Garmin device because I'm tracking my runs and my rides. And it just so happens that as you get the later ones, they got all this other data too. It may not be perfect, but at least shows me the patterns. Well, first give me your thoughts on, the wearable devices, on showing us what's going on a daily basis in these categories. And if there is any you recommend, be great.
Yeah. So I think they can be great tools. Like you said, they're data points, they're check-in. And with time, these things are going to get better and better. I think the art part, the context of it matters as to why somebody uses these things. I think that, let me just say this, for patients where they're a good candidate for it, we use that data to track patient protocols, effectiveness. Like in addition to labs, we want to look at the day-to-day real-time data of what that looks like from a sleep tracking device, heart rate variability device, and blood sugar, glucose when it's needed. Look, more data isn't always better, and sometimes it can add stress and anxiety around people around these things.
I've done that, Will. I get that. Okay.
Yeah, and it's like that's antithetical, right? You don't want to stress about not sleeping because then you're not sleeping as well, or it's impacting your physiology because you're stressing about the data. So I think for a time, for people who need it, it can be a great N of one experiment to check in with your own bio-individuality and say, how do things like food and stress and sleep and physical activity, how do these things impact my biochemistry? I love data, but sometimes it's nice to have someone outside of yourself to tell you what's important, so you don't have to decipher all this yourself, and you can drop it when you need to drop it and keep it simple and be human. So, but for a time, I think these things can be helpful. I love levels. I love what Dr. Casey Means is doing with levels. NutriSense is another. Those are two types of CGMs, continuous glucose monitors, that you just wear. These are for non-diabetics, right? That you wear for a few weeks. The diabetics, many of them have to wear it just from a management long term. This is from a lifestyle, just wellness optimization standpoint. You're wearing it for 3 to 4 weeks typically, and then dropping it. But you learn a lot about yourself. How does stress, how does sleep, how do foods and physical activity impact my blood sugar, which we have a massive epidemic of metabolic issues in the country, and it'll impact energy levels and cravings and sleep and weight loss resistance and all the things. But I love the Oura Ring. I've worn that before. It's interesting that I've done a lot of tracking for patients, and I see between the like Whoop band and the Oura Ring and these other metrics, I have patients that are real freaks and they want to wear multiple ones at the same time, and they get the same data across all the data points. So they're pretty similar. My experience, I've seen them be similar. So you don't need all of them. You just kind of need to pick one that you like and stick with it for a time.
Okay. And that's what I hear, the Oura Ring and the Whoop specifically on really tracking sleep and recovery and whatnot at a better accuracy point than like a Garmin. Again, I'm using it to track my runs and rides, but I appreciate again seeing the continual data. Well, so inflammation. Again, I think we hear about it consistently. If anybody's pursuing health and wellness, you hear that, but it feels like that we as a culture, we still don't get how rampant it is and how it's eating away at us. Maybe hit again the kind of the highlight inflammation points, but then you go into a word that I assume you coined, shameflammation. I've never heard that. And I want you to hit on that too, because I think a lot of people, and I'm going to pick on guys because I'm a guy and I can do that, I don't know a lot of guys that resonate with the word shame. Shame, it's not really on the radar. And yet, as you unpack it, I think it's obviously dramatically on the radar. So inflammation and shameflammation, give us the highlight causations.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So inflammation is not inherently bad. It's a product of the immune system. We need it to fight off viruses, to kill off bacteria, to heal wounds. It is a necessary part of human survival and existence. The problem is when we're talking about inflammation being the commonality between all these health problems, whether it's mental health issues, metabolic issues, autoimmune problems, anything you could think of has almost everything you think about has an inflammatory component or is considered an overtly chronic inflammatory health problem. Yeah. It's chronic inflammation that's the problem. It's that forest fire that's burning in perpetuity. It's a disruption of the Goldilocks principle in the human body. It's not too high, not too low, but just right. We need inflammation high at the right time, but we don't want it high for too long. And that's the case for many people.
Will,
when you're dealing.
Can I point out an analogy that you put in the book, just so that we look at? You said inflammation. I think you said something like, if I get, if you just knuckle punch me like we used to do as kids, in the arm, it's gonna swell. And that's what you're saying. It's supposed to do that. But now, if I keep getting knuckle punched every day and it stays swollen every day, that's going to manifest. And it reminds me of the book Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers. And that I love that concept that, man, they're there eating their grass, calm, cool, and collected. The lion comes along and they go from 0 to, full tilt. Immediately they get away. 30 seconds later, 20 seconds later, whatever, lion, goes off, and then they come back and they calm down. They don't go on and talk about it at lunch and then go talk about it at dinner and relive it the next day as PTSD and stuff. So is that an analogy of with inflammation and anxiety, both, that our body is doing what it's doing, but we just keep it at a place where it's doing it constantly, and that's killing us? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, that's what researchers call that genetic mismatch. We need the sympathetic nervous system response. We need that fight or flight or flee response when we need it, just like we need inflammation. So this neuroimmunoendocrine, it's really a confluence of the nervous system, the immune system, the endocrine, and how there's dysregulation of all three of those systems and the interaction between them. That's the problem. As we are seeing so much dysregulation of all three systems because we're living in this brave new world that we haven't adapted to. So that's why we're seeing these mental health issues, metabolic issues, and autoimmune problems. So inflammation is the immune system part of that dysregulation, which will impact all the different other systems of the body. And the body's trying to calm it. The body typically responds to that stressed response by releasing something called cortisol, which is an endogenous immunosuppressant. So it's a natural anti-inflammatory. The body's trying to create homeostasis. It's trying to rectify that lack of the Goldilocks principle. But it's just an unsustainable situation that many people find themselves in because the body can only take so much stress, where it's just this cumulative chronic stress response that something's got to give, and it triggers these genetic predispositions. It triggers dysfunction chronically in the body, which can manifest in different ways for different people. There's over 100 different autoimmune problems. Then on top of that, the non-autoimmune inflammatory problems that we face as a society today. But we have to ask the question, okay, the word I used was commonality. Inflammation is the commonality between, but something's dysregulating the system.
Right.
And that we have to look at the gut and the feelings, the physiological and the psychological. And that's where things really get interesting as far as what's going in what's the analogy that I use for patients is like the bucket analogies. The bucket's our body's own bio-individual capacity to handle stressors. And it's going to be the physiological and the psychological things that fill up that bucket. We all have different bucket sizes. Some people have big buckets, some people have smaller buckets. Many of our patients tend to have the smaller buckets where they can't get away with the things their family members can get away with. They have different methylation gene variants, HLA gene variants that makes their body a little bit more hypervigilant, a little bit more sensitive to things. You can't change your bucket size, but you can change what you put in it. And the foods, stress, environmental toxins, and shame and stress and trauma will fill up that bucket. And when you hit that tipping point, that's when symptoms ensue. That's when diagnoses happen in the conventional world.
That continues to feel so important because we do want to, as you talk about, we want the math to work. 1 + 1 = 2. So if you do that, well, my sister does that and it doesn't bother her at all. She's fine with the potatoes, but they just wreck me. And you're saying, well, yeah, different buckets. So again, back to what you said tipping point. So the body can only take so much. So when we all reach that, so if you have 10 people, let's say 10 women, 40 years old on stage, and they all are at that tipping point, what you're saying is it's likely, or it's possible, maybe even probable, that tipping point is it could manifest different in every single one of them. But you're saying the problem's the same. We're talking about inflammation. It's just going to manifest differently.
Yeah. And then what's causing the inflammation may be different for people. There's some low-hanging fruits for everybody. I mean, I think looking at the foods that people eat, there's a lot of foods that are common amongst the modern Westerner that doesn't allow the human body back for the most part to varying degrees. But yeah, there's all those chronic health problems ultimately if there's an inflammatory component, we have to ask the question, what's causing the chronic inflammation in the first place?
Well, it's interesting just to jump to the foods, because you pull out 3 categories, and I think you pull out sugar, of course, you pull out sugar, you pull out alcohol, and you pull out processed foods. And just to hit it, because it's such a fad, not a fad, but a focal point right now, are things like gluten or nightshades or the top allergen, culprits there. Where do you put those in amongst those initial 3 that you pulled out?
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, gluten specifically, which is the protein that's found in wheat, rye, barley, spelt, that's implicated in 2 different things. I mean, gluten's a protein. So it is in a lot of packaged foods are wheat-based and refined grain-based. And obviously from a carb standpoint, the sort of refined carbohydrate side of things, which is independent of the gluten itself, is also it breaks down into sugar. So it is part of that sugar, carb, and processed food conversation. But gluten is a third separate conversation itself, because what we've done to it, right? We've hybridized it. We've sprayed the crop with lots of things. We're eating a completely different grain than our ancestors ate, and then we're over consuming it. So it's served well from a famine sort of thing, because it's stored well. So throughout human history, grain stored well during times where there was food scarcity. So we're feasting on a famine food. So that's part of that genetic mismatch, and then what we've done to it. So there's almost always a better for you version of when you're having these conversations about certain quote unquote whole foods that are grains. Like, there are better for you versions of grains that make them more digestible, less immunoreactive, less inflammatory, like sourdough wheat bread would be a good, the fermentation breaks down some of the gluten proteins, making it more digestible, less irritating to the human gastrointestinal system and the microbiome. And, nightshades, it's those plant defense compounds that some people do have reactions to. I've talked about them in previous books, in the inflammation spectrum, my second book actually, where some people do have reactions to those foods. But is it the fact that it's stressing an already stressed out system? I think that's the case for most people. It's they're over consuming a high alkaloid, high lectin food, these plant compounds that in normal levels to a healthy human being, it's not going to be reactive. But when you're dealing with all these other issues, it's like higher on the spectrum scale of things that are going to stress an already stressed out system. But that's bioindividuality. It's part of my job. And it's trying not to make over generalized statements and say, well, that's bad for everybody. Because I'd be proven wrong all day long if I said that. Like, there are people that handle gluten just fine. There's people that handle nitrates just fine. There's people that handle certain amounts of processed sugar just fine. But some people have very little wiggle room. And we have to show them what's irritating their system so they can feel better.
I appreciate you saying that, feasting on famine food. I'll never forget the first time I was told the horrors of wheat. That was my thought. That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Man, that's biblical. Bread, come on. And yet it was a different kind of bread, one, but two, yeah, it would have been better if they had had access to fresh fruits, vegetables, even meats. And so I didn't learn that till a long time later. Okay. So let's go to this essence of feelings, and why amongst those you really pulled out and expounded on shame. That's not something you expect to hear when you're looking at health and wellness. Even if I look at the front cover of your book, I'm not expecting to go in there and talk about shame. And I do think, it's a term that I don't think anybody likes. It's not a sexy term. And maybe it's just me, but it feels like, from a guy standpoint, it's not one that I really have had on the radar until I got into therapy. And then I did. So, but go into that. Tell us about shame.
Yeah, for sure. And, it's funny that the cover of the book, the pairs on the cover of Gut Feelings are technically hugging. So I was trying to denote some sort of empath. If you still using food, but using food in a more of a emotional feeling way.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's something that fills up that bucket. It's something that fills up the bucket for many people. And we have to ask, well, what causes the shame? And maybe many people don't recognize and can pinpoint, oh, this is what I'm feeling. I am feeling shame. But when you look at unresolved trauma, which no matter who you are, it doesn't matter who you are, many people have trauma from their past that's impacting their body today. And that is, there's a lot of shame around unresolved trauma. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to go there. It's makes them uncomfortable, makes them defensive. They shut down. They change the subject. They don't want to go there and face it. That's shame. They may not even recognize it, but it's shame. And chronic stress, I find that to be a little bit more insidious, that there's shame there too. Low-grade shame, high-grade shame, different to varying degrees, but they're kind of snapping at their partner because they're stressed out. There's shame about that. Oh man, I should have never done that. I'm stressed out, sorry. Or they aren't present with their loved ones. They're looking at their phone to distract and numb and kind of deal with their stress that way. Or they are just checking out emotionally, or they are eating foods that don't love them back because they're stress eating. There's a lot of shame around that too, no matter who you are. I just think guys aren't as good, and I'm just stereotyping you because I am one too. We're not as good at recognizing and pinpointing it, and we're not as good at communicating and explaining how we're feeling. So it's no matter who you are, shame can play a role. I quote Brene Brown in the book. Shame, she says shame is lethal, and impact it has on our physical health, but also our relational health and with life, our relationship with life itself.
It felt like, we're really familiar with the terms of guilt and even regret, which on regret, I'm a fan of. We had Dan Pink on the show, and his latest book is The Power of Regret, that I think is a great look at harnessing understanding and harnessing regret. But we look at, guilt and regret, but shame based on that. Yeah. And I'll tell you, and for context, it took me understanding that I go out to perform. I want to have no limits. I want to fix everything for everybody. I want to make sure everybody's, okay, and be Superman in essence. If I can't do that, or that's really how I battle against shame. If I can't do that, if I can't be up to the task, I do. And we can go back and look at why. And I don't have great acute issues. I didn't have parents that told me I had to add up to nothing. I have the opposite. I'm very privileged, but I embraced that. And it took me a while to realize I'm running from shame. So it feels like that's the first place we got to go, is the audit that you're saying. We all have trauma, big T, little t. From that, we generally have some level of shame, and for us to figure out where it's coming from, why, so that we can then recognize it. Otherwise, it's going to be this constant, well, in this case, inflammation trigger. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's influencing your biochemistry just as much as the food. And people have realized that our body is a cellular library, and our thoughts, our words, our emotions, our experiences are the books that fill up that library. So I talk about the research of how things like stress and shame will actually impact inflammation levels, will impact our nervous system and our hormones negatively. Again, just as much as that meal. So we have to look at, what are we feeding our head and our heart? How are these things impacting my health? I see people cut back all the time. They've cleaned up their food. They're eating super clean foods that love them back in theory, but they're still struggling with health problems. And they're really not dealing with the feeling side to really move past that plateau. And, many people, when you're talking about shame and what's causing the shame, people will gaslight themselves oftentimes and say, well, it's not that bad. Like, it's like,
Right.
wasn't as bad as so-and-so in my life. And then therefore they'll just say, it's not that bad. But what we know now is that it's not about the experience as much as how did your body, or on a bio individual basis, how did you receive that? I hear a lot of siblings as patients, they have completely different memories of what happened. The same thing happened. They just all remembered it and received it, and it's impacting them in different ways. We all have different resilience capacities. We all have different bucket sizes. Back to that analogy, and how does that impact their biochemistry? It's going to be different for different people. But we know we have every telehealth patient fill out what's called an A score, which is adverse childhood experiences. The higher your A score, you're more likely. It's a component. It's an ingredient to the higher your A score, being more likely to have different autoimmune issues later in life, different metabolic issues later in life, trouble losing weight, things like anxiety as well. It's major. And it doesn't have to be, quote unquote, much when you're comparing yourself to sort of genocides and holocausts and massive things. But it's, what are these things? How did they impact your health? Which, it has to be looked at to deal with it.
It's interesting on the ACE scores. We've had people who didn't want to take them. They didn't want to know, especially if they were fearful that they had some bad stuff back there. And we got into it in looking at when the telomere reports were first kind of gaining popularity, and saw that. And we didn't understand, because it looked like somebody should just have a killer ACE score. I mean, I had a couple people, I don't know anybody who has and does live seemingly healthier than they do, and that their telomere scores were pretty terrible. And we talked with one of the docs involved with I can't remember which test it was, and he went to the ACE scores being so significant, which is frustrating because you can't go back and fix your ACE score. But then on the other hand, knowing it gives us the opportunity to take affirmative action. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. You're absolutely right. You can't change. I mean, most of the things that we're talking about when you're talking about childhood trauma, can't change it, and we didn't ask for it, but it's, what can you do now to support your health? And the body's amazingly resilient. And then, I mean, that's just going through the trauma that we go through in this life. And then I talk about in the book of intergenerational or transgenerational trauma, which is even trippier. And we definitely can't do anything to have changed that, but we can change what we can do today. We can break that cycle with ourselves, and in part, change our family, change the people around us, and change generations we'll never get to see.
So I got a question or something to ponder with you. Your book's sitting over my right shoulder. That's my book. It comes out in a couple of weeks, and it's called What Drives You. And it's on, really looking at drive and looking at motive. And so I look at this, and I'm wondering, how do we sell this to ourselves and to other people? I mean, you say one of the things in the book, I pulled it out. We need to be slowing down, getting still, and reconnecting with self. Okay, that's hard to sell. Nobody inherently just wants to do that. It's like selling fasting No, I don't know anybody who wants to fast or do burpees, myself included, even though they're great, right? So here's what gets me as I'm talking with you, because it feels like an overlap issue of, do we really want to feel better? Or do we want to inherently, or do we want to just do the things externally that feel good? So I just had Arthur Brooks on the show last week, and he talked about our propensity as humans to pick achievement over being happiness. And, Olympic athletes who would say, look, man, I'll only live 5 years if I can just get the gold medal. You can just, put a cap on my life. That we want achievement. I had Vienna Farron on, and she said, as kids, we tend to want to attach, and we'll take attachment with our parents and with everybody over being authentic. So, and now here you are, and you're calling us to do we really want to feel better? And I feel like for all of us, for me, for you, for the people listening, who, if you're not feeling well, do you really want to feel better? That we got to get to the core of the motive, because we can feel good right now, kind of feel good with some Cheetos and a device in our hands and whatever you're scrolling or playing or some entertainment or whatever. We can feel kind of that shallow feel good and try to mask it, but do we really want to? And it feels like a valid question I know that you deal with that with patients. At the end of the day, what is that? Do you find yourself grasping for what is their motive? Because just say, I just want to feel better. It's so nebulous of saying, no, I've got to find an attachment to that core motive.
Yeah. I think definitely people have different motives, and people have different whys, like why are they doing the things they're doing. And for some people, maybe it is more achievement based and attention and whatever. My job as a functional medicine practitioner is to get to their why. Whatever motivates them, I'm fine. If I can get their health moving in a positive direction, whatever propels them to want to level up their health on a physical level, on a mental, emotional, spiritual level, I'll take it. Because what happens is their why will oftentimes shift. When you're dealing with chronic health problems specifically, their why will shift over time as their health evolves. So what motivated them at the beginning, there's going to be different levels and different realizations over time where it becomes a new thing. It becomes a deeper, richer, more expansive thing that they don't always get at the beginning. You can't always expect them to realize, like, when you feel great and you feel the best version of yourself, what's going to motivate you then? Because when you're up against autoimmune flare-ups, digestive problems, chronic fatigue syndrome, chronic Lyme disease, mold toxicity, hormonal problems, the things I face with my telehealth patients, they're just like, I want to not be in pain. I want to not just struggle just to get through the day. I don't want to feel irritable and uncomfortable in my own skin. That's what's motivating them at the beginning. That's something bigger and more beautiful as their healing journey goes on.
Well, and so you're talking about those who find their motive, then obviously I'm sure you see, hopefully not many, but patients where on the other side, they ultimately just don't follow through. They spent time, they spent money, and they don't. And my assumption there is that they lost contact or never really solidified what is the motive. Why are they doing this? Kind of that question. I want to feel better. Well, why? Well, I don't want my knees to ache. Well, why? I want to be able to get down on the floor and play with my grandkids. Okay. Now we're getting there. But if we don't, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think that's why the feeling stuff's so important, because when you start to create a space around why you're doing the things you're doing, you can have enough mindful awareness to make a decision with a motive. Your why will be bigger than your excuses, which we all need from time to time.
You're a term that I like, and I'm going to be talking to my kids about this, is you pick on FOMO, fear of missing out, and you come up with JOMO, joy of missing out. And it is something that we had, I think it was last year, we had a week. So I live up in the mountains. My house, we have no cell service, and we get everything through the internet. That I have the screws. Oh, I did have a screw system. Now I'm grateful for Elon Musk, and I've got Skylink. But before that, we were out of internet for a week. So that means no cell service, so nothing, no texting, no whatever. And it was interesting to see that fear of missing out on the devices and whatever went away. And all of a sudden, everybody's in the kitchen. They're telling stories. They're laughing. They're playing games. And it was a joy. We saw a joy miss. And the kids, they understood that. Now, it's hard to do that. I was one too. And I thought about, I'm going to go to a flip phone. Oh my gosh, the things that I have to opt out of now, like my kids' soccer schedule, and everything's on an app, so you can do that, but it's hard. There's a hard cost to it. But that joy of missing out feels somewhat like a switch that has to flip. I had to do it even on rides. Man, I go out, I was a pro cyclist. I go out now, I mountain bike, and I'm kind of thinking about my time. I love pushing it. I love going fast. But when do I stop? It was a buddy who finally motivated me to, can we just stop and look at this view? We're at a high mountain lake. Can we just enjoy it for a second? Mm-hmm. And I had to kind of let go of that, missing out on my Strava score or, time or whatever that we're looking for in that joy of missing out. It feels that you're calling us to something deeper. Fair?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a way to support the parasympathetic. I mean, we have the autonomic nervous system. Both the sympathetic and the parasympathetic are needed. The problem is, on a physiological level, most people are hyperactive in the sympathetic, that fight or flight, freeze, stressed, inflamed state, and they're kind of weak when it comes to the parasympathetic aspect of the autonomic nervous system. So when people use the phrase dysregulated nervous system, that's simply put, what they're referring to is a hypervigilant sympathetic response, a hypovigilant, a hypoactive parasympathetic response, which has to do mechanistically with the vagus nerve. They have poor vagal tone. So on the feeling side of gut feelings, a lot of what I'm talking about there is how do we improve our vagal tone, which isn't going to be feeding it more sympathetic activity. We have to slow down, like disconnect to connect with ourselves and our loved ones, to be more present. Like, what's going to anchor you and root you in the present moment, which our FOMO culture with social media kind of compels us to reflexively constantly be getting that dopamine hit and having that anxiety to go back and check the phone. We may not even realize we're doing it. It's like a nervous tick. We'll just go back and check our Instagram feed. And it's designed that you don't have to shame yourself about it, but just grow an awareness to how are we spending our time? What do we do when we're bored? What do we do when we're anxious? What do we do with our downtime? Because it's the art of being human that we've kind of lost in many ways. So I teach practical tips within the book of how do you cultivate that joy of missing out, this antithesis of FOMO culture, to find just sacredness in the mundane, find stillness in our life, because so many of us are yearning for that. And we think about what happened over the last couple of years with the pandemic. You'd hear that everybody, so many people said the same thing. Well, the silver lining is, we got to slow down. We're just like inside, and we just like play board games and we hang out with our family. We already are losing that again. Yeah. And I just hope that it doesn't take a pandemic for us to realize what really matters.
That is, I did a show recently with someone on Friends, with Laura Tremaine on Friends, and she talked about putting Friends on her to-do list, which sounded kind of bad. But she said, we're busy, and so if I'm not intentional and don't schedule it in, it doesn't happen. It feels like that's what works best for me in dealing with this, Will, that I've got to take times. I've got a big family. I've always got a reason to have something present. But I went on a 3-day getaway and said, look, unless it's an emergency, I'm not going to pay attention to my phone. So I had to intentionally kind of block it out. And I find that even with days, there's times when we'll turn the internet off, or, all the phones go in the docking station, or we don't do it enough of just, let's turn the electricity off, which is harder to do. But that we've got to create those intentionalities. I don't find the moderation seems almost impossible. To be able to moderate, to not pay attention to the device. If it's here, if it's turned off, if it's not in Wi-Fi mode or whatever, it's just almost impossible that we've got to, well, I feel like you're coming at it with compassion. Say, don't feel bad for that. That's how we all are. And trillions of dollars go into keeping our attention. And so don't feel bad about that. But then what are you going to do to back off of it?
How do you create healthy boundaries around these things, right? And it's not going to be perfect. Every day could be a bit different. I don't want people to end up being legalistic about it and like, you know, skirting the system. I mean, just check why you're doing what you're doing. You're doing it for self-care, for your nervous system, for your health, for your relationships, health of them as well. So, I mean, for example, like we'll do the things that you just mentioned in our house. I have a 16 and 13-year-old. So like, you know, it's like the age where they want to be hyper connected, but it's what's the culture we're setting in our home, of not a list of not being authoritarian and a zealot about these sort of things, but how can we grow in mindful awareness about how we do these things? So, I mean, for us, what works for us is just, we have like the downtime sets on the phone where it will be a reminder. We could go, I mean, my kids can't do it, but we could go around and like bypass the code to get back in. But if we're setting the boundaries, it's for ourselves. Like, why are we doing what we're doing? I don't want to cheat myself. I want to really stick to it. And we could be more present with the people that we love. We can read a book, an actual book, or get outside in nature and start to do things that are really helpful for calming our nervous system.
I didn't want to miss the opportunity to hit on some specifics on food. Big part of your book is, I mean, you've got pictures of there and you go through specific types of menu items and recipes and whatnot. And looking at that, I find the effort trying to combat the feeling of, okay, so to be healthy, I'm going to go see Dr. Will and he's going to make me throw out everything in my pantry, everything I like, everything that tastes good. And I'm going to eat all this bland stuff. And in my own experience and with other people, I find that when you are used to, let's go to the processed foods, go to the high sugar, high salt stuff, and that I want people to hear is you really develop a taste to where now, I mean, I can't imagine. I know one of my kids wanted to try, because they hadn't had it, boxed mac and cheese. I think, are you kidding? It's terrible. I mean, it really, I don't want to diss somebody's favorite food, but I mean, when you get outside of that, have you ever had, even like homemade mac and cheese or whatever, or maybe something that's not just gluten and dairy, you really can develop a taste to where you enjoy that richer taste of a high quality, clean food than that. But just you speaking to the reality that we have trained our taste buds to think that we actually like McDonald's and the processed foods and the convenient foods. And I find that if you can really come over, I find people, their appetite literally changes. So it's not a lifetime of abstinence from things that taste good is the point.
No, it doesn't have to be either or. Like I love a food, or I have to pick health, or I love a food. You really can have the best of both worlds. And that's such a misconception. And people think they have to eat like a rabbit, or it's super boring. They're just not doing it right if they're doing it that way. Because I love everything that I'm eating. It really is the two-part thing. It's curiosity, it's creativity, it's learning new things. And we're not that good at that sometimes. So if you're in the trenches of like, this is what I eat, this is what I like, and you're telling yourself all the excuses as to why, going back to the why, right? If you're feeling great, normally people that are having these conversations around food, they aren't feeling really great. So you have to ask the question, okay, how do I want to feel? And if it's achievements that motivate you, like you will be a better achiever when you don't have brain fog and fatigue and digestive problems and you're less irritable. Or maybe it is your family members and you want to be there, live a long life, or enjoy the things that you have planned. Like whatever your why is right now, like you have to figure out what's keeping you back from the why. And there's no way around it. Every food you eat is either feeding inflammation or fighting it. There's no like Switzerland meal. There's no neutral food that's doing nothing for your biochemistry. It's influencing in some ways, some in negligible ways, but some in really significant ways that with enough time and consistency, you can start to really feel good and feed your body the raw materials it needs to make a healthy brain, to fuel your body from an energy standpoint and to lower inflammation. So yeah, it's there. Just look at the recipes in the book. You can see you can eat good food.
I did. I'm gonna try some, and it continues. I think I want to shout from the rooftops. That food is not fuel, and it's so profound to think of what I put in my mouth is literally the building blocks that I'm gonna be able to be creative tomorrow and write a book. Or not. And I think that when I can do busy work, I can, deal with emails and admin stuff and whatever, and kind of check things off the list at a compromised state to a degree. I cannot be creative. I cannot really create, or I think critical thinking and even just hope and inspiration. Man, those are the key areas that I see decline if I allow myself to get in a compromised state.
Yeah. Oh yeah, you're shutting so much of that off. That's a really an astute point that many people don't have these talents that they would have. They don't have these skill sets. They don't have these centers to tap into when they're feeling miserable. When you feel miserable, it takes a lot just to get up some days.
I'm curious as we look at with you, okay, with the next patient, with the next 10 patients that you're going to deal with. I mean, we've got food, okay, we've got nutrition, we've got exercise and movement, we've got sleep and recovery. And of course, now you're talking about, these are the, in essence, the paraphrase 4 pillars of functional medicine. Then we've got, body and mind. We've got I kind of want to say, for the sake of this talk right here, emotions. We're talking about feelings. When you look at that, of course, I'd love to try to get people like you to tell me what's the pillar, what's most important. And of course, you're going to say it depends, but just sequentially sometimes with your current patient load, with the people you're talking with, do you find that sequentially you're seeing more issues statistically on the emotional aspect of their health than just I want to say easier ones of food, exercise, sleep?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have to say that for the more complex cases that I see what a deeply entrenched role that the feelings plays in many different aspects. Now, they may not see it at first, and I think that's the difference, is that sometimes therein is the prescriptive food protocol. It is the supplements that I'm giving them, because they don't have the bandwidth, they don't have the resilience, they don't have like the nervous system regulation enough, the introspection enough to go and deal with unresolved trauma and chronic stress. They just, no, give me the X, Y, and Z. Tell me what to have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Tell me what supplements to take. And that's all, that's their in. But then when there's less inflammation because they're eating foods that love them back, when they start taking supplements to deal with nutrient deficiencies and supporting detox pathways, whatever the case it may be, I will see that they'll have the resilience, like their heads above that proverbial water enough to say, okay, now I can deal with that past trauma. I can deal with this unhealthy boundaries I have with whatever, and start dealing with the feeling stuff of somatic practices and EMDR and whatever we're talking about that needs to happen. But I would say that the feeling side of the gut feelings paradigm or perspective, the bidirectional relationship, that will impact their biochemistry so much in so many different ways. And I will say it's oftentimes the feeling side that will play a major role in the food choices they make and the sustainability of the food protocols that they are on. And it will determine the outcome of that food protocol, meaning that if they're stressing and having anxiety about that healthy food, that's stress and anxiety around a healthy food. Like, that's not good for their health either. So in a perfect world, I would want people to deal with both. But the feeling side, I have to say, it influences all the physical stuff in so many ways, and the choices we make and our relationship with so many things.
Well, I think I told this story on the show before. Maybe people haven't heard it. You'll appreciate this. I'll never forget my buddy who I talked about, Dr. Randy James. He co-hosts on here with me a lot, so people know him. And it was a story of a patient, and she was coming in and they were changing this and changing that. And finally he said, you know what? I just don't have anything for you that will compensate for the problems with your adult child living in your home. And until you get them out, I don't think that there's hope. All this stuff is, to use the phrase, pissing in the wind. And it feels like that typifies what you're saying there. When we look at that main thing that's stressing it, that we're not going to hurt by eating clean or exercising or sleeping. But if we have an acute emotional issue going on here, it's pretty much going to, I guess you'd say, sabotage most of our efforts.
Absolutely. And you think of Eckhart Tolle, the author, I refer to some of his work in the book is in any given situation like that, you have to change, leave, or accept the situation. And I see that all the time where it's that relationship that's this constant source of stress. Like, what do you have to do? She's maybe not in acceptance of the situation, or she needs to realize she needs to change or leave it because it's really impacting their health. I see patients, I'm not saying this is like super common. I want to like make it seem like I'm making people get divorces left and right, but I see people that have to get to the point in their healing journey where they're like, you know what? I realize that, yeah, I'm a lot better than I once was, but I'm stuck at this plateau in part because of this unhealthy relationship I'm constantly on eggshells and constantly in a fight or flight state every day of my life. Now they can go and try to change it too and go to therapy. But oftentimes I see relationships have to evolve and change and end sometimes because they get to the point in their healing journey that it's just out of alignment with them being healthy. And that applies to kids too, is healthy boundaries with family members.
Let me ask you then for some resources, if I could, Will. As people listen to this, not everybody's going to be able to go have you as their functional medicine doc or Terry Real as their counselor. And so if I could hit if there's some high point resources, and let me go through it. If you don't have a specific or you don't want to mention one, totally fair. We'll edit it out. But let me start with a couple on an advanced diagnostic standpoint. So if somebody's out there and they're hearing that, yeah, normal blood work is it doesn't get very far. They'd like to have something advanced. Is there one that, of course, we're talking to a broad audience and more than nationally, but at least that, anything that you recommend for people on an advanced diagnostics, which folks, I'm talking about, well, blood for the most part, blood work of really going under the hood and looking to see what's happening, which is a hallmark of functional medicine to start with.
Yeah. Well, yeah, no editing needed. I love talking about this stuff.
All right.
So, I mean, we are, we have a telehealth center. That's my day job is running the clinic. So we have new telehealth patient options for people. So we have group concierge options. We have one-on-one telehealth concierge options. And then we have people just getting labs. So we have definitely options for people if they want us to look at it, me to look at it. But I am such a fan of these direct-to-consumer labs out there that are providing actionable data. And I realize that many people don't need or want a functional medicine doctor right at this point in their life. They just want to learn about their health. Yeah. And maybe they will take the labs to us at some point, but they don't need to. And what's cool with a lot of these direct-to-consumer labs is they will give you recommendations to do on your own. Yeah. And I love that. So if I want people to have agency over their health, and I think that the democratization of health information, the decentralization of health information in many ways is so good because there was always this gatekeeper, right? It's like you needed to go someone with a white coat and get this health information, and they told you to take this pill for this, and it was this medicinal matching game, and that was the only options. Now we have the age of gatekeepers when it comes to so many things. Least of all, most important of all, probably would be health information. This is your body, and you have the right to know about what's going on in your body. So one that comes to mind, it's a company called Inside Tracker. Am I saying it right? Inside Tracker. I say it all the time.
Okay, well, God bless you for mentioning that one because they're actually advertising with us right now. But I was gonna let you go anyways. So that is one. So I just had mine done. I literally just had that. So here's more free advertising for them. But had it done, and it comes with this list of, hey, you are compromised here. Here's some things that you can do to help that. So yeah, I really appreciated that. So thanks for mentioning.
That's amazing. Yeah. Hey, they're good. I mean, a group of researchers from Harvard, Tufts, MIT, really providing data that's helpful for people. And, it's a good starting point. They're going to run labs that are beyond the basic ones. You don't need a doctor for it. I think that's wonderful. And then if you need a functional medicine doctor later on, we can run some additional stuff if you need it. But look, most of the people, you can get a lot of information from that lab. And what I also like about Inside Tracker, this is not a sponsored post at all from my perspective, is you can actually see how you're aging from the inside out. You can actually see your chronological age versus biological age and see your aging. And you can actually, based on their recommendations, actually improve your age. You can actually reverse accelerated aging.
I did that. They tacked on the, whatever they call it, the age thing. And so I'm 52. Mine came back at 42, which is amazing. It's good. I want it lower. So I want a bigger span on that.
Okay. Until I see 30s, that doesn't count.
Yeah, totally. So I am interested because it's benefited me on food allergies, finding out the things, whether it's allergies, sensitivities, whatnot. I've been grateful for that. And I found out for myself, eggs is pretty high up there for me. Legumes and beans are pretty high up, like green beans. Who's ever allergic to green? green beans, or, allergic / sensitive. I think we use that word allergy a lot. But I'm not aware literally of one out there, a direct to consumer food allergy test. Do you know of one?
There are other ones out there. I don't know if it's Tracker does one, but there's
I don't know that they do.
Everlywell is another one, and
Mm-hmm.
there's Zoomer. I think there's one. There's so many labs out there. Viome may do something like this as well. I think that what my mind goes to, I'll tell you my hot take on food sensitivity testing, is more those labs for most people. In most cases, there's exceptions to what I'm about to say. Most cases, most people, it's more of a sign of intestinal permeability or leaky gut syndrome and less to do about those foods.
Okay.
So remember, all labs are snapshots in time. So if like green beans or like strawberries or whatever random innocuous vegetable or fruit shows up on there, I want people to realize they don't necessarily have to remove that food forever and ever. Amen. They just want to, what's my body telling me? What's this lab telling me? And if you get lots of foods positive on there, oftentimes it's foods that people tend to eat a little bit more of. And that's not always the case. And sometimes it's just there's a hyper immunoreactivity across the board where it's showing that the body's reacting to lots of different things. And if you went back to that lab the next day or the next week, you may see different foods being positive. Because to me, I think the action step, like what can I get out of this lab data set when you talk about food sensitivity testing, for me, most of the time, it's ruling in intestinal permeability. That's what you have to deal with. Actually healing the gut, getting integrity of as far as the immune system's concerned and resilience, so you can reintroduce those foods. So that's not to say removing those foods for a time couldn't improve progress as far as symptoms, because it may, not always needed. But I'm glad that you pointed that out, like allergies versus sensitivities or intolerances, like I think the interchangeability between that. These aren't true food allergies at these food sensitivity testing. And what can happen is people unintentionally, these labs can lend itself without proper context to fear and anxiety around healthy foods, like this orthorexia that I think is not helpful. So I think it's just important to talk about because they can be helpful, but they're not like the gospel where they never change forever and ever. There's a lot of variability when it comes to these things.
Well, I appreciate you saying that because I've experienced it myself and I've seen it with other people. When you get to the point of fearing food, it's a bad place to be in.
Yeah.
Well, let me anchor us then with on the side of feelings. Now, obviously, I'm advocating the book. That's what we're here to get. So go get Will's book, Gut Feelings, find it on Amazon or wherever. And you reference Brene Brown in there, and of course she's got resources. Are there some highlight ones, any person, provider, book, whatever, and it may be another one that you have as well, but that you would, if somebody's sitting there right now and they want a resource immediately and want to go, order something on Amazon to get some insight into well, as you said, to look inward and get some insight into yourself in regards to these gut feelings that they may be dealing with that are harming their health, and they want to get some insight.
Yeah. Well, I would definitely follow the tools and the protocol within gut feelings.
Yeah.
I teach these feeling practices like self-compassion and gratitude and breath work and meditation and somatic practices. Those are all very much important from a vagal tone, nervous system regulation, calming these stress hormone responses in the body. If they want further reading beyond that, actually, Dr. Nicole Pera, who actually wrote the foreword to Gut
Feelings, I saw that.
She's the holistic psychologist on Instagram, but she's a holistic psychologist naturally, and she does amazing work. She has amazing books, like multiple books out, and has more coming up that are great further reading, I would say, for people that want to learn about what I'm talking about here, like the polyvagal theory and how to metabolize stored trauma that I talk about in the book, but she talks about as well. And Brene Brown's a great resource. Dr. Caroline Leaf is brilliant neuroscientist who one of her books is called Cleaning Up Your Mental Mess. She has a new one coming out for kids, which is an app as well. Just a brilliant mind. Dr. Daniel Amen, who is another brilliant psychiatrist talking about these things. Dr. Uma Naidu, who's another psychiatrist, a nutritional psychiatrist. She A lot of these are friends and colleagues of mine who wrote forward or blurbs about the book, but their work just stands on its own. Dr. Umenedu, Dr. Drew Ramsey, Dr. Ellen Vora, The Anatomy of Anxiety. These are all psychiatrists and psychologists that just are great resources. I hope I didn't miss anybody, but I think that's most of them.
Well, and then I'm going to give everybody your full list in the intro as well. So I want them to dig in with you. Man, the book is significant. It stands out. Like you said, it's different than any book you've written. It's different in the category I would normally put it in. Even functional medicine, I'd say it stands out and really brings us to, what I'm seeing in myself, as well as others, is such a primary culprit that we are missing as we look at the basics of nutrition, exercise, sleep, and whatnot. Man, thank you for doing this, for writing a book unlike any you've ever written before and bringing it to us. I'm chief recipient, but eager to share this with the audience as well. Thanks for the time, Will, and the insight.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for joining us in the discussion. That again, Dr. Will Cole, type his name in. You'll find him anywhere. Again, a huge following on Instagram, at least, and he probably does elsewhere as well. His book, Gut Feelings, Healing the Shame-Fueled Relationship Between What You Eat and How You Feel. So, till next time, here's to you and me making better meaning in our lives and experiencing the miracle of living.
Yeah.